Hey everybody, welcome to the Spirit Visions directing session. We're here with director Pepper O'Bomsawin, she's one of my favorite directors that I've had to work with. Pepper, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Pepper O'Bomsawin. I currently live in Ganawagi. I'm from a small community though called Odanak, which is a territory up along the St. Francis River in Quebec. And I've been living here, I think, since I was about 14 on and off, other than my schooling, mostly because I have a 16-year-old son. So where our child rests is where we do. So yeah, I don't know what else you want me to say, but that's my personal stuff.
No worries, Pepper, you've directed That's Awesome, Hit the Ice,
You're
and
froze again, actually.
no, no. That's good, and Indigenous. So, tell us a little bit about yourself in directing and how you got into it.
Sure. Growing up, my father was an advocate of he was a huge watcher of documentaries. It was something that I used to spend a lot of time doing with him. And being that he was an activist, it was a form of offering voice. I think my goals when I was younger are a lot different than they are now that I think when I was growing up, I really wanted to get into this industry to focus on injustice and stories, unveiling stories for Indigenous people that focused on, I guess you could say, some of our darker sides. And I realized two things very early in my education. I was at Capilano studying, and I realized that one, I wasn't sure that I was ever going to be able to not tell a biased story, because no matter how much research I did, I seemed to not care what the opposition, I was still very immature in my practice. And, I think that it's hard to tell a story when your heart is so connected to one side, at least a fair story. So I decided that until I was able to do that, it probably wasn't the storytelling that was best for me. Another reason I stopped was because I also felt that within all the negativity and the hard stories that presented themselves, I also always felt really angry and really, I felt like that, like you carry your work with you, and it's really hard not to do that. And I think that I really didn't like the person I was becoming. Not that I was becoming a nasty person, but I was carrying so much, and I was so angry because we have a lot of reasons to be angry.
Yeah.
But I realized that was a weight as a director that I would carry, and it wasn't something that I was willing to do for my own mental health. Mental health is a big thing in my family, and we're well aware of how it affects us. So I had to re-look at my career and start looking at, how could I leave the same impression and do important work, but not tell these stories? And I realized that at a very young age, I moved into a house with a group of girls when I was a student. I was, a wild teenager, and did all the things most teenagers did. And one of the things I realized that really helped me clean up my act and find focus was having great role models. And this household of women they're powerhouse women, and having them around me on a daily started to change the way that I saw myself, and also started to change the way that I saw my future and what I was worthy of and what I was worth. And then I started to realize that, we've had a really good showing of our Indigenous dark side. Canada was really good, and the US really good at showcasing all of the stereotypes. And I realized that in a lot of these rural communities where you didn't have access to anything other than what you see on TV, that was the way that our people were being represented, and that was the way that our youth were connecting to who they were. And I started to realize that was a big part of the problem, was that how do you see a hero when all you're ever shown is, the drunk or the you know what I mean? So it became very clear to me that what I had to put my life's energy into was changing the image of First Nations on screen. And I started to take projects that were celebratory and heroic, and I always, or that really just showed our culture in all of its beauty, so that I could reach out to not only the outside communities, but also our own communities, to say that we are worthy, we are doing great things. There are beautiful Indigenous people out there who are successful and amazing, and they come from small rural communities as well, a lot of them. And it's just being able to share those stories and see that drive, I really found that it lifted my heart in a really light and happy place. I think I'm a lot happier of a person doing the work I do now, and also allows me to get introduced to some of the most amazing Indigenous people across Indian country, Darcy included. But it's, and I just started realizing that it was important, and it's funny how at the end of the day, I had set out to do something one way, but really found that the way that I'm doing it seems to be what's really feeding my soul. So yeah, I was lucky in that. I'm lucky in the sense that I get paid to do something that really fuels and feeds my soul. That's, so that's something I would encourage anybody to chase and go after. It's worth all the hours put in.
It's our days are really long. But you said something really interesting is, as Indigenous people, whatever we do, there's always politics to it, right? We're always having a voice. And sometimes our stories that we're telling, I work on Taken, I worked on the MMIW inquiry project, and it's how do we let that go? Like, how do we, take over these projects, but then also keep healing and not take that home?
It's not an easy process, and I still do work on. I have a project coming up that's looking at the rehabilitation of women in the sex trafficking trade. They're not easy projects, but I also do think that now I'm older, I'm more mature. I'm not as attached to, I've started to learn what my triggers are. I've started to learn about intergenerational trauma. I'm not the same person I was in my 20s. And I don't think you ever walk away and don't carry it, but I think you learn how to accept change, move on, and own it. And I think also offering voice. I mean, we all know at the age I am now, and having done the work that I've done on myself, I know that offering voice to myself or to anybody is a healing process within itself. So, I think it's important to know that while we're telling really, really hard stories sometimes, that process is a healing process within itself. There's an acceptance that comes from being able to acknowledge and say things out loud. Like I said, I don't think you ever don't carry it, but I think it gets a bit easier when you invest yourself into being part of the change and being part of telling the stories that Canada doesn't know, or a lot of people in Canada are ignorant to. And it's time. It's time for us to unveil that dark history, to build on our relationships, and the only way that we can move forward as Indigenous people in Canada is if Canada gets on board and starts kind of accepting our past, so that we can move into a brighter future, with better relationships. But that's something that needs to be done. I kind of went off topic there. Sorry, Darcy, the ADD in me on a Sunday.
No worries. It's great.
It's a creative flaw,
No, it's great, because back, I've asked these questions to even my mentors, right? How do we as Indigenous people deal with our subjects who are dealing, unveiling themselves, and then, keeping within the traditions and all that. But, what's the biggest lesson you've learned as a director as you've gone through your career?
The biggest lesson you've learned as a director. Ooh. That's a hard question, Darcy. The one thing that I do that I would say, and it's not that it's a lesson as much as it's a means of carrying yourself within the field, is that you really have to realize it's a collaborative effort. I've worked with a lot of directors who I think sometimes take the word director a little too far, and they're not comfortable sets to work on. One of the things that I pride myself on is that when people work with me, they walk away having loved the experience. I make sure that our energy on set is always very good, and I believe that we do this because we love it, so we should all be acting accordingly. But I also really, really lead, and I will say it's the biggest lesson, that you can't do it all, and that it's a collaborative effort, and that every person involved in the production process is key to making that production come to fruition. And I think that when you try to take on too much and you try to do it all, somewhere something's going to suffer from that, either in the product, either in your home, either your children. Like there's always going to be a backlash. And it's funny because now I'm getting older and I'm starting to go into the producer's chair, and I'm really learning that there are so many people better at doing the parts of production that I don't love doing, you know,
Yeah.
and that they execute it beautifully. And that, you know, if we yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, because I think when you come into this industry, you usually because of budgets, you do it all. But I think the more I grow in it is really learning that, one, it's a skill you're never going to master. It's a forever changing industry, which is why I love it. And you really need to handpick some key great creatives to help bring your project into fruition, because it's not a one-man band. It's not something that you do on your own, and respect what everybody brings to the table. I'm somebody who, even when I conduct an interview, at the very end of the interview, I'll usually turn to my DOP and my sound guy and be like, did I miss anything? Because, you know, I'm so engaged but maybe there's something they're curious about. And if they're curious about it, my audience might be curious about it. So, you know, I always kind of allow everybody to be part of the, really part of the process while we're on set. And that's been, you know, has helped my productions come together beautifully, and also makes for a very pleasant working environment, because we all kind of feel like we're in our element. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can attest to, you know, being, you know, on working with you as the host, you know. I mean, that was one of my favorite episodes. You know, we had so much fun. We kept messing around, but it was a very positive environment for everybody, right? So I know that you mainly work in documentary. So how do you kind of go from making shorts to getting into being a documentary filmmaker, or being on a series and stuff like that?
I mean, I've been really, really lucky. And I think one of the biggest things I would say to a young person trying to make it in the business, because there's a lot to learn. And I am 41 years old, and I've been in the industry since I'm 17 years old, 9 if you want to bring on my acting career. But you know, the one thing I would say is find mentors, ask questions. You know, producers do become your best friends if you don't want to be part of the chasing the money train, because that's where it comes from. I've been very, very fortunate. I started doing shorts while I was studying, and my first film that went to festival and got seen, my boss at the time, I was a bartender, he paid for the film, and really encouraged my career. And then coming out of it, you know, I just met some really great people that helped guide me in the right direction. And you know, before I knew it, it was 20 years later, and over 20 some doc series that I had done. You know, I really had a good roll of it. I became known for doing doc series. I have a couple of features under my belt, but my forte is really doc series. I kind of like the recipe of that. I do work in a bit of drama as well, but not as much. I really enjoy the story, the process of telling real stories. Not that drama's not real stories, but I like chasing the story as I go. You know, documentary is very unplanned. Well, as planned as we can possibly make it, but it's very unpredictable. And I love that. I love that I can go and write, and then go and after the writing, see what actually happens, right? Because we never actually perform what we intend. We try to, but you know, life happens. But the biggest advice that I would give somebody who's trying to make that transition, because it is not an easy one, it really, really isn't, is to really, really look up and work with mentors, and ask the questions. And there's not one of us in Indian country. I know there's so many producers who have been so good to me in helping guide and teach me, and even non-native producers have been really amazing in helping me. You know, like I think of those Canadians, and I think of Affinity in Ottawa, and I think of Niche Media, and I think of it's Wabanach, which is what we did. You know, there's a lot of really great companies out there, and I think that because it's such a complex puzzle, we're all really apt to helping each other out in this industry. Like it is a competitive industry, but it's not when you're an up and coming. I think it's more competitive amongst the established. But yeah, the up and coming, I think we really, really want more storytellers. I think that as directors, Indigenous directors, we're a little frustrated that sometimes it's hard to not hire an entire Indigenous crew, because the skill sets are not just, we don't have the numbers, but we want those numbers. So yeah, like I don't think there's a director or producer out there that's not trying to bring in more mentorships and more to be able to shape. But that for me, I mean, it was a bit I don't want to say it was an easy ride. I worked night and day, 7 days a week but I never felt like I was working. You know, I'm really living my passion. But I think that hooking up with the right people and just not being afraid to ask questions, because there's so many questions in this industry.
Every day new things.
Yeah. And just to always make sure that you're growing within it, right? Like, I think that that's, like I said, one of the reasons I love this industry is, have you ever had a day where you were bored at work?
No, not definitely not on that awesome, that's for sure.
Our list of to-dos, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Something new. I remember I was on, sorry, I'm gonna divert. I remember I was on set one day and I was doing background work, and they're like, oh, we want you to be we were doing that big circus, right? We want you to be the guy who hands out balloons. You know, the guy with like the old school and the
Yeah.
and they came out, like I remember getting put in a vehicle and they sent me out to like where you get prepped. And they came out with like a clown costume. I was just like, oh man, this is, and then that's, I got used to it, because then That's Awesome would do that to me, and they go, hey, we got an idea for you, and it's like, let's just have fun, right?
Yeah, you were such a trooper on That's Awesome. I think it was funny because I remember coming home that day, and production can be really, really stressful. The days are really long. I think the one thing I loved about That's Awesome is that it was a kids show, so our hours were already like, yeah, which I was like, oh my god, I should be doing more kids shows. The days are easier, but it was also just like, it was a really great writing team, and everything was really well so planned out, and you were just such a natural at taking direction. Like, I just recall like saying, could you fall on your face but be funny while you do it? And then you would get up and you'd be like, so how was that? And I'd be like, it just wasn't funny enough. Could you do it again and just be funnier? I think sometimes I was just messing with you to see how far we can get, how many times we can make you.
I just go as far as you wanted me to go, right? Because it's like, you know, like working with a director, it's like, for me as a host, it's always like, okay, like I'm just gonna go wherever you want me to go.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess that's a great question. Like, how is it like working with like documentary subjects as to working with like an actor or a host, you know?
It's very different. I think the first thing that I had to learn, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to say this on camera, but I think the first thing I had to learn was that actors are really, like you kind of have to massage that ego, which with real people you don't, right? Like because they're playing themselves, right? They're not playing a role. And I think that with actors, the hardest thing for me to learn was how to, first of all, you're not guiding documentary as in terms of its like there's no acting, right? Yeah. And like I said, I don't do much drama. I did, however, do a series called Premier League, which was all recreations. So I had to deal with work with a lot of actors, and I would think that was the biggest thing, was just trying to learn how to communicate and get what I needed from them, but also not make them feel like they were failing at it, because that would also affect their performance, and it would just become this kind of snowball. And it is a skill. Like when I look at drama directors, it is a skill to be able to pull the very best out of an actor, but also keep their ego intact. Like, you know, the acting world, I always say, like, it's such a hard world. And I look up to actors because I don't know that it's such a critical world. Like, you're always going in and being criticized, and that's gotta be really hard to shake off. So yeah, I absolutely love my acting friends and how they've managed to be able to, you know, not take any of that personally, because I know that that's got to be a difficult part of the job. And I also really look up to directors who work with actors all the time, because it's not easy to pull the best out of somebody and be able to have that communication and that dialogue with an actor when something's not working. I think when something's working, it's great, you know, and for me, I'm like, oh, this is amazing, because I'm not really having to, but when it's not working, that's where you really have to start challenging the dialogue between you and the actor. And that's not always easy. Yeah.
No, it's tough. I mean, you know, as a young actor, I remember being on a show, and it was hard to talk to the director. And then you spiral as an actor, and then, you know, you're like, oh, you know, they're hard. And then, you know, having 2 seasons of That's Awesome, and then doing an audition recently, and you know, I kept on getting lots of notes, and instead of spiraling, it was like, oh, okay, I know how to take this and control like that panic feeling and all that. But yeah, no, I had to direct once, and I had to talk to actors, and I was like, I don't know how to talk to them. I don't know how to talk to, I have no idea.
Well, the funny thing is one of the things that I do is I talk to actors about how they, like, I talk to a lot of my acting friends on how they get the best out of their director. Like, what do their directors do to make them feel that they can bring their best performance to the table? How are they best guided? Because some actors need everything written and need everything just to be so, but some actors like to have free range and like to ad lib, and you get kind of more, it becomes more natural because they're actually adding some of themselves or the character that they've created, or, you know, for the role. Another thing that I think is really cool in terms of the process of acting and directors is that sometimes a director is after something in terms of a character, but then is introduced by the actor to something way better than they could have ever anticipated in terms of what they were thinking in their head. So yeah, and both directors and actors, I think we're all overthinkers. So yeah, it's quite a complex relationship. So I always tend to pick the brains of actors and just kind of say, like, what works for you? What, you know, what are some of your favorite directors, and what were some of the skills that they brought to the table that really helped you pull your best self out of you? You know what I mean? So, you know, it's always about asking questions, always about learning, always about knowing that every single, you know, like people ask me, I worked my way up through, I didn't start off as a director, you know, none of us do. I started off as a PA, and then I got into production coordinating, and then I got into production managing. And so, you know, and the reason I did that is because I think the more you understand about the production process, the more successful you're going to be. And the more understanding you're going to be of what everybody's role is and the pressures that they're dealing with, because it's a very, very hard job. And I think sometimes, you know, in director, we can become hard on our coordinators, and we can, you know, but I think once you've done all those jobs, you have more compassion for all of those roles, and it makes you a stronger team member as well. So that's something I would also encourage is don't be afraid to dance through everything when you're starting out. Don't think that you needed to be a director overnight, because I think one of the things that really helped me become an amazing director is that I worked in so many different areas of production. So my skill set is really well-rounded in terms of understanding the process and the relationships between each person on the team in order to see that process come to flourish, or the film come to fruition. So that's another word of advice is, you know, don't be afraid to be the PA or the gopher or because, you know, everybody's needed to do the job, and there's so much learning there's so much learning that comes with just being on set. So, you know, take every opportunity you possibly can while you're growing. And then once you become established, then you start getting to choose the quality projects that really fuel your soul and define your life's purpose or your work. You know what I mean? So that's another tidbit of advice that I think I really benefited from coming up through the industry. But I started very young. Like, I started as an actor at 9, and I realized at a very young age that I hated acting. One, I could not deal with the criticism. I was way too bold to have people criticize me. Two, I'm also not a very patient person. I think as directors, we're like movers, and actors are more like, you know, hurry up and wait, which is something that I just, I have a, so yeah, and that, and I think also just, yeah. So acting wasn't really for me. I always tell people I'm very dramatic naturally. I really don't need to be an actor on top of it.
Yeah, no, so how do you, like, for our film days, they're super long. How do you keep focused all day?
Oh my God, it's like Red Bull. And it's not easy, but I think I don't drink Red Bull anymore. But I think at one point I was running off caffeine, and just, you're young, right? You just want to. I think now that I'm older, I value sleeping when I can. Power naps are a thing; they're amazing. You know, when you see everybody on the crew sleeping for 15 minutes at lunch, yeah, they're doing that because they're literally going to be able to handle the next 9 hours. The other thing is just, you know, eating properly and just making sure that your mental is good. And, you know, at the end of the day, I don't know how you do it. You just do it, you know, like you funnel, you chill, and you push through. And I think you're so focused on the task at hand that you only realize how long of a day it was when it's done. Like, I really think that I only realize, oh God, that was a 16-hour day when I'm crashing in a hotel room at, you know, 3 a.m. So, and have to get back up in 2 hours or 3 hours. You know what I mean? So I think it's only the in-between that we notice the crazy.
Yeah, when you explain it to someone else.
Yeah, because when you're on set, you don't notice. Like, it's such a creative rush. our job is so fun. Like, you know, you really don't, there's not, as a director, there's not a lot of waiting around. Like, we're always chasing story. We're always moving. We're always, so there's just no time to get tired, if you want to say. Like I said, I think I only really notice it when I make it back to my hotel room and I'm like, oh my God, we started at this hour, you know? But like, when you love it, you know, and when you love it, there's always sugar, fuel, whatever you need to keep yourself going. But like I said, I don't think I've ever noticed that our days are as long as they are until they're over.
Mm-hmm. So this will be my last question. What's your favorite set experience that you've had so far?
Oh my God, that's impossible.
A hard one, I know. It's my favorite.
What is my favorite set experience? I mean, there's just so many great moments, but if I would have to say, oh God,
It doesn't have to be D. It should be like our favorite. We'll give you some leeway.
Okay, so I'll give you two. One, I got to work alongside Fred Savage, which was my first childhood crush. So it was so surreal to now be like assisting him, and that was on Blue Mountain State. And he looked, yeah, I worked a few seasons on Blue Mountain State as a producer's assistant. So I got to work with him, and that was just such a crazy show. Every day was a crazy day, but it was really neat to work with somebody that I had admired growing up on television. And of course, he hadn't aged one bit, so it was like I was starstruck because he still looked like Kevin from the Wonder Years. And then, which you're probably too young and don't know who he is, but his brother, he's Bully guy on. Do you know who he is? His brothers, his brothers from Boys Meets World or whatever. He was just probably your generation. Anyways, a lot of people when I say like, oh, I got to work with him, Fred Savage, they're like, who's he? The Bully guy? I was like from Austin Powers, and I was like, yeah, but he was. Yeah. But I was like, but he actually had a full career before that, you know. And the other was Sashi Littlefeather. I got to do an interview with her about her Marlon Brando speech, and it was we were doing Princess. It was the series that I did that was giving a platform to Indigenous women to speak for themselves and talk about some of the issues that we're plagued with in terms of stereotypes and you know, the idea of breaking down the word princess and Pocahontas and so on and so forth. And we, you know, we talked about all different industries, and I got to sit in a 3-hour interview with somebody that was just so iconic to me. So yeah, and then just the travel, right? Like New Zealand, Peru, like my work takes me places. So yeah, there's just too many moments to give you one. I'm sorry, I could go all day. Sure, that's your last question?
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. But thank you so much, Pepper. This has been a great interview. It's been great catching up with you again. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, and have a great day.
Yeah, and if anybody's looking for mentorships, don't be afraid to hit me up. Like I seriously, I mean, we're in the Montreal area, but we love mentoring youth and getting our young ones up there and starting to get them on their way. And if you have any questions, I'm always on social media, and I hope to work with you again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Darcy. Nice to see you. See, I told you I was going to awkwardly wave.